Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome. Like Maha says, old friends, new friends, always friends, to our final sixth episode with Sister Amina, understanding the nature of trauma, finding inspiration, support, and resources as we learn to gently heal. Inshallah, this will be our final learning session, and we intend to follow up with another session for just questions that we will announce, inshallah, by the end of the session. So, without further ado, I will let Amina have the mic for our final session. As always, if you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat or feel free to welcome and join in with when we have our pauses, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
So, salam alaikum to everybody who's here. I've been thinking and feeling winter, and we're getting close to those days when there's less light. And for some people can feel that in the body. You know, we feel the change of seasons and the days become shorter. And I was reminded of a quote by Carl Jung that said, "Remember in the darkness what you have seen in the light." So, and then a few hours ago, I was online and someone had posted some wise words by our friend Rumi, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. And he also spoke about the darkness. And he said, sit with your friends. Don't go back to sleep. Don't sink like a fish to the bottom of the sea. Life's water flows from darkness. Search the darkness, don't run from it. Night travelers are full of light, and you are too. Don't leave this companionship. And I love those words because it made me think about the sacred circle here and the companionship we have, particularly when we're in a circle, that there's a learning and a sharing. This wisdom teaches from the heart of everybody. And I need this companionship perhaps as much as some people listening might need it. That this constant reminding to remember the presence of Allah in all things, to remember the light within. And I think perhaps I was speaking with Sister Sarah at one time, and I was speaking about Native American tradition. Was it you, Sister? Just a little bit. And they're looking at the four cardinal seasons. What we can always remember with winter is that in this deep, cold heart of winter, there is always the promise of spring. And sometimes our souls might be in a state of winter in the middle of July. This time when we've let go, when there's a seeming nothingness, that the blossom of summer is no longer here, and autumn has given willingly the harvest, the bounty and the blossom of its being on the altar of the earth. And we come to winter, and it's this great, deep settling in our being. And we speak about that, about the ability to settle in our bodies. And sometimes there can be a sense of emptiness about winter, or maybe when we let go, a sense of just fullness. I lived in Wisconsin at one time for about 6 years. And I remember walking, I lived way out in the country and just seeing my breath in the air. And there was something very alive about that season, a different kind of aliveness from the green of the earth and the blossom of flowers and trees. But there's also a silent, It was a silent emptiness that was rich. And so there's many times in our lives when for me it might be feeling like I've hit rock bottom or a kind of emptiness. And that's a good time to do, as Carl Jung said, to remember in the darkness what I've seen in the light. And that when we really settle into these shorter days and this place of darkness that for some people has a kind of life and death quality, we always want to remember what we've seen in the light. That becomes what guides us, and not judge it as something, yarhamakallah. And not to judge it as, something great or small, just to appreciate what we've been given in those deeper silent moments, and just remember that the promise of spring is there also, this promise of rebirth. And I've thought a lot about how resurrection is spoken of many, many times in Quranic scholar, but I see that word in many prayers and in the Quran, and in a sense in our own lives. When I think not just of trauma work, but just of life, that we're given opportunities to let something resonate in our soul. Does that make sense? The Sufis talk about die before death. And there's something that
Sister Amina, you're muted.
shut off the screen. Everyone disappeared for a moment. But at any rate, sometimes there's this word of resurrection. And I've often felt in my life like there's parts that are dying or fading away. And out of that, there is a resurrection. That we are often resurrecting parts of ourselves, moving from a part that maybe didn't feel so alive, or some numbness, or a part that maybe felt deadened. And it may have been something that's there for a long time, or just something happened. Sometimes you can listen to the news and feel that. So this is the possibility of this renewal of spring within ourselves. And it's always in that divine right timing. When those take that may be something, watching a baby laugh, or it might be something that is a different body. But bear with me. I'm, I guess, feeling somewhat poetic at the moment and fumbling for words. So tonight is, as Sarah said, our 6th class, and hopefully it will bring us into the heart of the intention of these. So when I had first begun to learn about trauma, I had hoped to bring it into the Islamic community. And so I've been very touched by the invitation to come here, because there's a kind of fulfillment in me for having the opportunity to do this by the grace and thoughtfulness of Dr. Yamina. And I really wanted to thank all of you for thoughtfulness and kindness, patience in this. A series of classes in smaller ways, more sound bites with people. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to coordinate this information. And my prayer is I hope it's been helpful for some folks. So I was reflecting on having listened to the very first talk of Dr. Yamina's I heard was on YouTube. And it was on Surah Yusuf. And I was deeply moved. It was one of those you had me at hello moments. I heard her speak, and it just opened up some deeper feelings for me and understandings. And one of the things that was alive for me in this beautiful teaching was the different ways in which Sayyidina Yaqub, so Jacob in English, and Sayyidina Yusuf, or Joseph in English, responded to life's events. And for me, it was a reflection of my own nature, which is both human and divine. And it seemed to me that what I had read was that Sayyidina Yaqub was so overcome with grief that he went blind. And that Sayyidina Yusuf's journey was always trusting in the unfolding and the outcome of all that his sustainer had placed before him. It's not to say that Sayyidina Yaqub didn't have that trust, but he was deeply affected by the loss of his son. And so sometimes in my own journey, I feel grief and fear and confusion. And yet by the grace of Allah, I'm always reminded that everything, even the one leaf falling to the earth, is unfolding according to divine intention, whether I'm aware of it or not. It's all unfolding according to divine intention. And that we are both human and divine. For me, Sayyidina Yaqub and Sayyidina Yusuf are as two bookends, and in the middle is the unfolding of our lives. So I'm not asking anybody to accept that. I'm just saying that that's my reflection on this. And sometimes in that unfolding of life, that's the place where trauma work has supported me. So what this work has done is help me navigate in the deeper waters of my life, the places where I might be floundering and trying to catch my breath. The simple act of simply learning how to befriend the unloved parts of myself, as our friend Rumi suggests in his poem, The Guest House, has encouraged my heart to greet not only myself, but others and the past with compassion. And I'm not saying I do it all the time. That's no small undertaking. And I slip into fear and forgetfulness often. In understanding also how my personal history has shaped me. We spoke earlier of thoughts crystallizing into beliefs, beliefs becoming habits becoming personality, and personality shaping destiny. The other piece that's very alive for me in this work was learning that my body has, and all our bodies have been wonderfully created for protection and love, safety and love, protection and connection. And that's helped me appreciate the wisdom of who created this clay vessel. Sometimes I might feel shut down and depressed and dorsal, or chaotic, confused, and frightened in the sympathetic nervous system. But I now know that these responses were put there 6 and 5 million years ago, respectively, for safety. They're an older part of our nervous system, and they're still important. It's important to be able to feel red flags in our life. So there's an importance. But I also now know that there's a bridge, a way out of these states. The ventral nervous system is a refuge and a saving grace. It was built into our bodies. It's known actually as the compassion nerve. And I've got someone quoted here. This nerve wires us to care. It is in this state that slows the heart rate, softens our eyes, and brings a kind tone to our voice, and even moves us to reach out to others. And this same ventral vagal energy supports self-compassion. the act of reaching in to be with our own suffering and kindness. So that's big to me. That's big. And to me, it's the field beyond right and wrongdoing that Rumi spoke about. It's that place that we can come to take us out of these states that are older and often based on past history in order to come into a place of refuge. And what I did with the notes this evening was I put in bold print, I missed some places, I know, the words that relate to the 99 names most beautiful of Allah. So there it is, it's refuge, you know, brings us into a place of refuge. In my life, I had great trauma, and many human beings have had great trauma. But in that trauma, I was running from the unloved parts of myself. And suppression is not the same thing as surrender. I needed support to build a bridge and begin a process of trust between opening and healing. Does that make some sense? Do we need a little pause here? Does anybody want to comment?
Pause, I think, would be good. I see some nods. I just kind of to put everything back in perspective, and for me, what's becoming extra clear is when understanding trauma and healing, the key that I believe, Amina, you deliver very beautifully in the qualities that are so clear in you, are to be very gentle and open that door of compassion to not only ourselves, but the feelings and the thoughts and the senses, that compassion to just stay with the feeling and just, like Dr. Yamina says it all the time, and the repetition is so merciful that it's coming again and again, that we have to be willing. And I just hear Dr. Yamina's willing to be willing for those who are not, at that stage of being willing, but just let that compassion, I guess, just be open to that compassion and sit with what it is. And the reflection that came to me today that I was going to share, and then we'll open it up for everyone else. Seeing my thoughts, feelings, senses, all like roommates, that we're all just in this house of a body together. So when someone's like doing something annoying, or I'm starting to sense something new, it's like, okay, let me lay down and kind of see what this roommate in this house is getting stirred up about. And I like that connection to the house. So I see that there's a comment in the chat. Did you want to share? I'm just going to mute myself so everyone can feel.
There's, I see that someone has just put in, suppression is not the same thing as surrender. And then Sister Alia put in, suppression is running away, while surrender is returning home to my Creator. And there's a wonderful story I'd like to share that Jack Kornfield tells, and he's one of my teachers in mindfulness meditation. I've never met him, but I've taken, Zoom is wonderful, online courses, and listened to him on YouTube. He's a wonderful teacher. And he came from a very abusive family and said that the role he adapted in that family was to be a peacemaker. As a child, he was always trying to keep peace. And later on, he went to college, and at some point, he ends up, I think, working for the Peace Corps. And he had wanted to be in a Buddhist community. And he ends up at a Buddhist monastery and is there training to be a Buddhist monk for about 17 years. So he was very immersed in this work. And can you imagine mindfulness every day for 17 years, right? And still having life experiences while you're there. And eventually he came back to America, and I forget the reason why, but he started seeing a therapist. I know he's a trained therapist. And the therapist couldn't get him to bring up his deeper feelings because in his training, he'd been gotten so good at being able to witness them, just witness them, right? To work with the breath. And finally, as Jack Kornfield tells the story, the therapist said to him, what is the time of the day when you're least strong? You're not strong. And Jack said early in the morning, I'm not a morning person. So the therapist said, right, and started making appointments at something like 6:30 in the morning in order to get under the spiritual armoring that Jack had developed in all those years to allow him to feel the deeper feelings that had been suppressed. It doesn't mean we have to emote and bang the walls and be angry at every little thing. Some things we can certainly surrender. But if there is a point, and that's what was happening in my life, I didn't realize it, but I was trying to spiritually suppress things that needed to be named and to come up and out in a safe way. Remember, if we're not judging the feelings, then they're okay. And for me, the bigger stuff needed support. Smaller stuff, not so much, but the bigger stuff needed support. And this very kind of understanding that I'm sharing, that worked for me. For someone else, it may not work, but that became the support I needed to begin this deeper work on myself. And, I'm still digging. So Rumi says, I think, I haven't been able to find this quote, but I remember reading it somewhere. If you go diving for pearls, don't dive in fountains. If you're diving for pearls, you have to go deep. So I think that makes good sense. Let's see, I'm just looking at, yeah. So someone's saying that they like the concept of naming the feelings because through the name we know and we can understand and witness. And we can feel too. Absolutely, we can understand, witness, and feel. Yeah. So needing to be named and come out into the light in a safe way. Thank you for saying that. That's really big. We have to have safety. We have to have safety. Earlier in the year, prior to COVID, I went to see my go-to person. And it was a very specific issue I wanted to deal with. Sometimes in families, there's secrets, there's things people don't name. And when you're aware of them, it becomes energy. It becomes energy that gets stuck in the body. And I wanted someone who was really present, safe, compassionate. So I could regress as far as I wanted. I could just be with myself in the moment to experience whatever I was holding around these old family stories. So a lot of times shame goes with that. Shame goes with those deeper feelings. So, and we seem to, I say it later in the notes, in relationship to compassionate communication, but we need a language in order to be able to express ourselves in the landscape we've already entered. This is not the 1950s or 60s or 70s or 80s or not, it's 2020 right now. And the world is really in this tender place. And it's an opportunity for this light of the soul, for people to name things and feel strong in who they are and loved and to connect to their own truth. Right? So for me, so even though some of these words sound a little strange, regulation, self-regulation, co-regulation, resources, we have to have words. We have to have a new language for the territory we've already entered. So, yeah, so like I said, healing doesn't mean I never experienced trauma. I have those moments in my life when I feel like, did I come with a missing piece? there's that feeling, like I can't figure this out. I'm confused. What's wrong with me? I've had lots of those lovely moments in my life, but at least I understand the process and the trust and opening and healing. That's what it is. So this great friend of mine once said that loneliness is different from longing. And I believe under all of this, sometimes on the surface I feel lonely, but underneath there's that deep longing. And that's where the companionship comes in. So many years ago, long time ago, I was in a mosque in Marrakesh. And I remember that the prayers had ended, and I sat in this quiet timelessness. And it seemed that there was opening in the, places where there weren't windows, but it was open between the outside and the inside. And hanging above me were brass lanterns suspended from the ceiling. And I remember looking at one lamp quite close by. The door was open and I could see a nest. And the dove that lived there was free to come and go. And I remember watching that. I always have to put my hand to my heart when I think about that moment, just being entranced in that eternal moment. And for me, the lamp is our heart. The dove, perhaps our spirit, making its way in the world and returning home, like the wild geese we read about in Mary Oliver's poem over and over again. What a beautiful moment that was. And it brings to mind the ayat Nur, Allah's the light of the heavens and the earth. A likeness of his light is as a niche in which is a lamp. The lamp is in a glass. The glass, as it were, a brightly shining star. So here we are. It's a night for poetry. Bring out your heart and your poems. So divine qualities, we might say, are also known as needs, though Allah knows best. And they help in rewiring our nervous system. The path within and without becomes straighter. One of my mentors on the path of Islam told me that generosity is one of the divine qualities of our sustainer and a doorway into the heart of the path. So when I was a really young woman, probably about 22, I lived in Morocco for 2 years, and that changed my life forever. And I lived in Tangier most of the time, and it was so timeless, such a sleepy little town with donkeys in the streets. And I remember a street with a long and winding sidewalk. And there were beggars, and I'm trying to think of a kinder word. Would miskinen be the word? Beggars, at any rate, many of them blind, sat on the sidewalk. And of course, there was the road, the sidewalk, and where they sat, there was a wall. They had something to rest their backs against. And I was always attracted to the same man because he sang the Koran. So I got to hold my heart again. One day I went to give him some money, and the moment I said Bismillah, something happened inside of me. I understood that there is no giver and no receiver. There's only God. It was God giving to God. We are not separate from him. What a lesson for a young woman. It's the rest of my life learning that lesson. What is trauma work? Anything that helps us to remove the different forms of forgetfulness and brings us closer to the beloved. That's trauma work. Gratitude softens and opens the heart. There are so many ways we can show appreciation to others and to Allah, whose hand unseen is the sustainer and guide in all things. Do we need a pause here? Would anybody like to say something? Add something?
Yeah, I love there was no giver and no receiver. Like I love that not only you perceived like that when you were giving, you realized like it was coming through you, but also you saw in his eyes, you saw through his soul that he was receiving, knowing that that this has been given to him by God. That's just so beautiful. Thank you for
Okay.
sharing that.
Many ayat for me in those early days. So in front of most of the lessons, I wrote, healing is in the return. Tell me, please, is it tauba? Tauba is return, yes? In Arabic?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Shukran. Barakallahu fik, as they say in Morocco. Barakallahu fik. So healing is in the return. I was reading the Quran one day and I wondered why so much repetition was there. You were just talking about this, Sister Sarah, and I have a brother by the name of Hassan Jordan who was talking about this the other day. But some months ago, I was wondering why there's so much repetition reminding us to return. It was like I got a little, oh, so I want to hear this again? Why is this always being repeated? Astaghfirullah. So later on, while I'm taking my dog out walking, an inner voice said to me, that's why. And I realized that my mind had drifted once again. It's so easy to forget, even with good thoughts. It's so easy to forget. And so, whether returning in prayer, coming back to an awareness of the breath, seeing an act of kindness, a moment of beauty and compassion, even tragedy or something else, we are reminded to turn our hearts to the sustainer again and again, lest we become lost in forgetfulness. And sometimes we forget, and I think it was Dr. Yamina who said, we were explaining, and correct me please, right? But you were talking about ghafla, and you said sometimes people just forget. And then and I'm trying to remember, and then sometimes people are, we remember or forget, and then sometimes people are heedless. And they know they're not supposed to do something. So it's maybe a different kind of forgetfulness. I've probably got this all backwards. But my analogy for me was one, ideally, I should never have chocolate, right? We can all dab our eyes at hearing that, right? Little dark chocolate's okay, not much more. So I remember that. Sometimes I forget and have some. And other times I remember and I have some anyway. So there's different stages of forgetfulness, I think. And I would just say that we all forget. And what is it that reminds us to remember? What is a simple word or a poem or some beauty in nature or a moment of prayer that reminds us? So in this work, whatever our work is, go slowly with patience. It takes time for a seed to find its way in fertile soil, to become rooted, to grow and blossom into living expressions of beauty and love, and so much more in this cycle of life, the seasons of our soul. So, what are our resources on this journey to the health that's always present? And in this, I studied something. In the beginning, I said, I'm curious. I'm not a master of anything, but I'm curious and I've studied a lot of things. And I studied something wonderful called biodynamic craniosacral work. I love this work. And they refer to the life force in the body as the health that is always present, that's what does the healing. And to me, that's what's so important in this work. I have a little education and some nice tools, but I always have to remember that where the healing is taking place is the wisdom, the health that's always present in the other person's body. That's what's doing the healing. And that wisdom, that innate wisdom that exists in every human being, even in someone who's very sick, is there. And that healing knows exactly where it needs to go to support, to continue and allow to grow that health that's always present. So, what can support us in creating a bridge out of trauma and into it? Always seems a little funny to now say into the ventral vagal nervous system, but ultimately into the living presence of God. And that's the two bookends, and we're somewhere in between. You know, we're here, wherever we are, we're in process, and it's a place to be. So for me, the understanding of the nature of trauma, compassionate communication, and insight meditation, as in terms of things to learn, have been medicine for me in this life. So insight meditation has helped me to discover what it feels like to be at home in my body. And if I'm fortunate enough to have that alignment between body, heart, and mind, and then perhaps one might say soul, to have that alignment there. And it can deepen and do so much more. But just that is really big for me in this life where I have a very busy mind sometimes. And I'll talk a little bit about compassionate communication next, but the nature of trauma. So on our resource page that I gave you, maybe it was last week, I think, went out with the notes, there are ways to touch into some of this support. So there's a way you can study insight meditation for free, 15 minutes a day for 40 days. It's quite amazing. And it's with Jack Cornfield and another teacher of mine, Tara Brock, both well-known people, well-versed in therapy and trauma, understanding the value of insight meditation and trauma. So I highly recommend that. And also there are resources for compassionate communication. And if we don't have time tonight, I'll try and speak about that a little bit on Sunday. And then of course, whatever Oprah Winfrey said, you have to have a way to connect to your spirit every day. So for us, it might be praying 5 times a day, might be the dhikr with the our beloved prayer beads. It might be being with small children. It might be going for a walk. It might be catching beauty. Go out in the morning and say, what beauty will catch my eye today? That's asking for what you need, right? So someone asked me, I think it was Sister Maha, wanted to more clarity. So it was either you or you were responding to someone's comment, Sister. What does compassionate communication have to do with trauma work? So for me, human beings communicate. I communicate with myself through my thinking. And I communicate with other people silently, with my thinking also, body language, but also my words. We communicate with people, but how we communicate with others and ourselves makes all the difference in the world. The old ways of communication that list shame, blame, criticism, guilt, and punishment when we speak using those tools or are recipients of it, that creates trauma. That creates trauma in our being. And this is this quote that I mentioned earlier. We need a new way to listen with compassion and communicate with honesty and clarity, a way that will help us create connection. It is a language for the new landscape we have already entered. For me, it's a language of the soul. Compassionate communication isn't something to be used, though sometimes I've grabbed onto it, like a lifesaver, right? Ultimately, it's something that can become a part of who we are. So in the few of these classes that we had in this, we learned a formula for compassionate communication. We have one little piece of that, or big piece of that formula left. I'll try to go with tonight.
Amina, can I
Yeah.
ask a question? So about the question that was asked, what does compassionate communication have to do with trauma work? Since we defined trauma work as anything that helps us to remove the forgetfulness that brings us closer to the beloved, can we say that when we are not using compassionate communication, we are actually falling into more and more trauma, because then we're stepping away from that compassion in ourselves and then with others, and then that's actually adding to trauma.
Absolutely.
Is that
Because
really true? I mean, people who use compassionate communication, are they aware of the beloved?
Well, for me, when I
There
think of
there
the
is a difference between emotions coming from the ego and emotions coming from the inspired heart, the connected heart. Because everyone is created with the need for compassion and the appreciation for compassion, generally speaking, unless there is a problem. However,
Yes.
it does not mean that the person is aware of the source of the compassion, and that the compassion is flowing through us as a blessing, as a messenger from beyond, to let us connect to the source of compassion, which we truly need. Because just appreciating compassion, but knowing deep down that if we are not in touch, connected with the eternal source, knowing deep down that this compassion can disappear anytime, is itself traumatizing. But this work, does it teach that? Does it put us in touch with eternity, with the eternal compassionate one?
Well, for me and for the teachers that I've met, that it's not just a matter of speaking to a person a certain way, it's learning to really listen with the heart, to be present, to listen to someone's words with awareness and compassion. And whether or not a person has that awareness, let's say, of the beloved, I would say, or understanding that it comes from, let's say, coming from God and the beyond, what they're developing is a softness of the heart and a listening. And so it's sort of not my job in a sense when I'm with a person. If someone's speaking like this, I feel blessed and visited by something very special. And so whether or not they have that connection, I don't know. And my feeling is that it's very open. It's not that people have to believe a certain way in order to be a part of this, but maybe by being a part of this, it's going to deepen their understanding about life and God. And that may not be a word that they use. So it may not come in that way, but anything that's, for me, that softens the heart and allows people to express of the same values that I share, and who are willing to greet me in a different way and that I can greet in a different way. It's creating connection. So it may be not with that depth that you teach, and maybe some with maybe exactly that depth. I had something I was going to read, and I could possibly do it now. And it comes from the Compassion book. And one of the things I would say is that in wanting to understand our life's purpose, sometimes we have that purpose of knowing God. But sometimes our child self knows, our child self has a deep wisdom. And did that help you? I mean, I don't know. Did that help, Dr. Yamina?
Yeah, thank you. I did not have in mind people, but the teaching itself.
Yeah.
As people, we don't know.
You know, it's no, I don't think it's going to be taught as a spiritual teaching, but certainly the values of this are a spiritual teaching within itself for me. You know, I have to make that as an I statement. So I can share with you, because we had done just a few classes in this. This is, I've written the name of this book on the resource list, probably the best book you can have. And this was written by Tom Bond, who had permission from the founder of this to go ahead and create this work. And this is how Tom came to it. He said, when I was 12 years old, I picked up a Life magazine. And in those days, that was a coffee table sized publication known for its groundbreaking photography. Little did I know that what I was about to see in that magazine would change the course of my life. As I leafed through the oversized pages, I came to see what I can only describe as one of the most horrifying things I had ever seen. I saw for the first time in my young life the reality of war. There was a photo essay on a military action that had taken place in Vietnam. Up to that moment, for me, war was a game we played with make-believe guns. No real blood, no real pain. Just a game to be won or lost before we headed home for dinner. As my eyes scanned the pages, my brain was scurrying like a frightened animal. As I took in these images, two things happened. First, I understood that war was real and a horrible reality of my life as human. And second, I refused to believe that it was necessary. That night and for several days following, I shared my experience with the grown-ups in my life. They assured me that war was a necessary part of life. My 12-year-old secretly refused to believe them, and yet I had no answer to why that was. I looked and I waited for many years. In 2001, I read Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life by Marshall Rosenberg. By the time I had finished reading the first chapter, my wait had ended. In the book, Marshall showed that there are concepts, skills, and practices that we can develop and use to connect with each other. So much so that we can learn to transcend violence. From then on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I began my study of Marshall's work. By 2002, I had sold my engineering business, sold my house, and moved to New York City to start, with his permission, the New York Center for Nonviolent Communication. By 2004, in the process of starting and growing this organization, I had spent every dollar that I had. Most everyone was convinced that I had lost my mind, with the exception of my parents and my dear friend Nellie. to name the ones I hold the most appreciation for. And maybe I did lose my mind and found my heart, my dream. I was clear. I was willing to live in a cardboard box if need be, but I could not imagine doing anything else besides this work. I remember one day in particular that year. It was the first Monday of the month, and I was especially worried because I was dealing with the reality of my net worth going from six figures to negative $600. That night, I gave my first Monday's free introductory workshop as I had on the first Monday of every month. Afterwards, a woman from a local community service organization asked if she could hire me to teach her and her colleagues. My first paid engagement, I said yes. The next day, within 14 hours of the first invitation, I got a call from a member of the Communications Coordination Committee for the United Nations. They too wanted to hire me to teach. My dream was becoming a sustainable reality. 14 years later, on a cool, sunny Wednesday morning, still in the comfort of my home, I sit down at my computer once again to put the finishing touches to the last chapter of a book I have wanted to write since I was 12. Thank you for sharing this moment with me, with tears of gratitude, humility, and awe. Tom. So it's hard for me to say what door it is that opens us to something deeper and greater. He names his door. It was this, and he's the one that started this worldwide program, taught in something like 21 countries in 14 languages. So I don't believe it will have that same approach, but it certainly is approach of this removing veils from the heart instead of shaming and blaming and guilt and kind of conflicting language. It's how do we create connection, my heart to your heart? How do we create connection, with God's creatures, so to speak?
I have a follow-up question, just to sort of bridge. I'm wondering how those who have been following us with Receiving Noor and Dr. Yamina's sessions of Quran study may know, and whoever has not, then a brief sort of just comment is that we are always focusing on this first emphasis that Amina's sharing of how to be present in your body so that you feel it as truly like you're living in a home, and then there's things inside that you're discovering and you're just living inside of this vessel. So with Dr. Yamina's teachings, now we make this bridge that everything that's being sent in, everything that we are feeling, interpreting as a need, is a message that its only purpose is to connect us directly to the source. And that's what makes it meaningful. So then I was wondering, as Dr. Yamina shared, trauma to me now seems to start whenever I'm not present in my body. And then everything that follows will be misperception. Because then I think my feeling, I don't see any messenger. I don't have that connection. I don't have that horizontal connection like Dr. Yamina says, where I'm not noticing something in my body and then wondering what the need is and wondering what the message could be and then making that connection to the source. And then so I was wondering if I'm willing to follow what Amina is sharing about this compassionate listening that has to be done first at the level of yourself, then we would receive the message, which is a need. And then I'm wondering now that bridge to the source to make it something that's eternally fruitful, because really we only get security when we are connected to the source. So then my question was, when I can be compassionate with myself through this I feel because I need, and giving true space to really feel what's happening inside my home, it's actually meaning that I'm receiving compassion from my source because I'm opening that space to listen. I guess what you're referring to is insight meditation. What Dr. Yamin is also practices also just to notice what's happening in the body. And so if I can, I guess, witness that compassion, be compassionate to myself, we're saying, then I can choose to share it with others to promote healing for myself and others. And then I guess, Dr. Yamina, my question would be, would the bridge be then to do that, be compassionate to myself, and then therefore be able to reflect it to others, be the means that I can stay in alignment with the source of compassion?
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Yamina, did you want to?
Sorry, I thought the question was to Amina.
No,
MashaAllah, your name's Amina, Yamina. MashaAllah.
I was asking you, Dr. Yamina, because then I was just saying how to make that bridge between compassionate communication and the source of compassion, so that we're receiving that connection with the one that makes us feel secure, and therefore it becomes a meaningful practice.
I won't be able to answer this question because there are assumptions that I will have to question first, to clarify first.
So for me, it's simply a way to, how can I be more compassionate? And it is a way for me to be more compassionate. How can I let that quality grow within me? You know, and for me, it's support for that. And I often imagine, what if this were taught in schools? There are people that have taught it, but and not just at the level of the children, but of the teachers and the staff. We would create a different culture if we could learn how to listen compassionately and speak honestly. And what we did in these classes is we just touched the tip of the iceberg with this work. It's much deeper and transformative than what we experienced in class. Class was like a little mini introduction. So it's much deeper and transformative. I actually have a story I could share about this if you like, but it can't be recorded. Is there a way to hit that off button? Or
I think this, you mean like can be edited later on?
okay. So
That's
I really,
I think you can. I think she just had start the recording, so that way.
so Jack Cornfield says, this woman found herself sitting between two warlords in the Sudan saying, no, 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 that's not a need. Tell me what you need. She had gone there to, probably by invitation, I would guess, some woman from Michigan or somewhere in the Midwest, right? To help people just, can I hear what the other person is needing? Can I pause and listen? And if that's a place that we start, that's big for me. Marshall Rosenberg told a story about being in a Palestinian refugee camp. And while he's walking around looking at the conditions there, he sees tear gas canisters on the ground that say made in USA. So spent tear gas canisters. And I'm not being political with this. I'm just making an observation, his observation. And later he's giving a talk, and one of the men from the camp, he was invited there to speak, got up and started yelling at him. And he was able to pause and hear the man's needs underneath. And they were needs that he could reflect back, like, I understand. You have a need for your children not to be walking in raw sewage and to have fresh water. And you have a need for your kids to be able to go to school and to be warm when it's cold out. And he just kept listening to the man. The man yelled and yelled, and he met every concern. Marshall didn't try to overpower, be defensive or offensive. He just listened and tried to create connection. He listened to what was in the man's heart. So for us, if we have that understanding that all of this comes from the sustainer, even the opportunities to meet people or meet ourselves in compassion, it's just another school. It's another way to learn how to give birth to those qualities. So
where is the line drawn between condescending and belittle? I mean, the example you just gave made me question, was he a Zionist? I don't know him, Marshall Rosenberg, even though as a young mom, I did, it was very fashionable in the community where I lived, to teach parenting based on nonviolent principles and communication. But I don't know if he was a Zionist going to Palestinian refugee camps telling them, okay.
no, not at all. Not at all. He became a therapist, and he did it. He used to get beat up because his last name was Rosenberg. And I think that was, when was that? Well, he's gone. He's, so he would be in his late 80s, 90s now, maybe. But he realized, even as a therapist, that people didn't need diagnosing. They needed to be seen and heard. And that was, in a way, what gave rise to this different way of meeting people. Different way to meet people.
But do you see my question, Sister Amina? Where is condescending, and especially somebody coming from, I mean, the Palestinian example is a thorny one, because this is a Jewish man going to Palestinian, to a colonized area and telling them, I hear what you need.
No, he wasn't colonizing. He was from America. He wasn't there in the name of politics. It was, how can we go to places in the world in order to create connection, not just in Palestine, but in every country. And that's why this has spread.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying that the example of, please don't give this example again, because it is thorny, because it is highly political. And we don't want to say a Jewish American man went to a Palestinian refugee camp telling people, I hear you, I feel you, because this already sounds condescending and defeats I don't know I don't remember Rosenberg's political affiliations properly to be able to judge. So I trust you. I trust what you say. However, it doesn't illustrate the point. So maybe, and neither does the point in South Sudan, where an American woman from Michigan goes and speaks to warring factions. There's something not right in this.
For me, it's how do we connect with a person's soul? How do we meet each other? Values in our heart, the heart of what Tom Bond hoped to create in Marshall Rosenberg, a place without violence. We have to start in our own country, and we start with ourselves. That's the work. That's the work. But what I'm hearing is your concern that it might be demeaning to people. They might perceive it as demeaning, and rather than as connecting. And it would be wonderful. I would encourage you. I think that there's a possibility that to look at this work further. So to see the heart of this work. Like I said, I may not have presented it properly. Certainly just the story of my meeting my daughter in a different way. How can we meet each other in a different way? That's
Okay,
piece for me.
that makes sense. But the Sudanese and the Palestinian example, sorry, no, especially at times of the racism, the awareness after the racism incident in the US, we've learned that white entitlement and speaking, I mean, this is not the vibe
Right.
that is very liberating. And if I believe that New Bridges, the work of New Bridges came out of the nonviolent communication, and I was quite involved with it as a attendee of workshops, and it is a self-identified Zionist
No, this
movement.
would be something else then. This is quite different. So I would invite you to explore it, and then
Okay.
and based on exploring it, to decide that. Also, I will try and remember to bring to Sunday's meeting, inshallah. As I mentioned, this is being offered in about 20 countries in the world in 14 different languages. I have the website for the portion of this that's presented in Arabic. So, and it's presented by somebody whom I'm assuming is Muslim. I had actually written them for some people I know in Egypt that I thought this might be a good resource for. And so I can bring that to the meeting, and that might be another place to find connection. This is very removed from any political leanings. It's how do we create healing within ourselves and connection with others. And I did mention in a previous class, there are moments when the best connection, if my connection is to walk away from a person, to say, I can't listen to this right now, to walk away. So we can't always be with people and visit them in a way that we think they may need. But I will look for some resources for you that might be supportive and just give you a greater understanding of the heart of this work. Would that be helpful?
I trust you. If you say it's not as a Zionist movement, I'll take your word. But I'm just saying I'm careful about certain things that sound neocolonialist or
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get that. And it's not, as a matter of fact, I had a newsletter from one of their websites today asking, do you feel there's enough, not outreach, but enough, what do I want to say? Inclusiveness in people of color and so on and so forth. Are we being inclusive enough?
Sister Amina, do we use trauma now in the recent examples you gave? As though it's also stress? Are we using trauma and stress interchangeably?
Yeah, I would say so. So what is the body saying when a person is stressed out? And it's about listening to the body. Where is that stress coming from? What's a person feeling and feeling? It feels stress. And what's the underlying need? So
I had a question. You said you need to find a safe space and a person to go to where you can open up.
mm-hmm.
So if I need to do it with myself, like everyone cannot find someone to go to who you can open, who will be compassionate enough to listen and
Mm-hmm.
language. So how do you give us that tool to develop that within, like
For,
that space for ourselves?
for trauma?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one resource I have is my teacher lives in Charlottesville, and my face isn't on her, his can go to. I would encourage people that might be inspired to learn this specific work to go on her website. You can learn, classes in how to offer this work. And I found that they're very healing. It's not like you're learning here. You have to go through it in your body. As far as working with somebody, there are people in the community here that do this work, and I can certainly provide you with a list and see if we can see if I can create a list if people email me of others in other communities. And of course, today everything's being done on Zoom, so it's not so difficult to meet with someone. It's possible to have these sessions through Zoom. I think always a little more effective in person, but it's a place to start. So, and I, again, at the beginning, put my email down, and I'll put it down at the end as well. So if people have further questions past Sunday or want to know something, they could connect. So how's that? Did that answer your question, Lala Ziba?
Yeah, actually, my question was more for everyone. Like,
Okay.
do we have at our hand to like which we can use it for ourselves to find that compassionate space within ourselves? That was my question.
Yeah. All of the above. I think all of these insight meditation, particularly in compassionate communication, often have website pages. I've got lots of resources, not lots, but some good resources. And as far as the trauma work, then there are people that I do some of this, but I also know people very well versed in this that do this. Got my go-to people. So.
Amina, what was the name of your teacher? You broke up when you mentioned the name.
Her name is Janet Evergreen, and she's my primary, not my only, but my primary teacher in this. And you can find her on janetevergreen.com or .org. And I have great respect for her. This past spring, she had taken a 3-month retreat. Imagine going into retreat before COVID and coming out after COVID. And her classes are are deep water. I'm one of her assistants, and even assisting her classes, I go through process, just hearing her words. And I've mentioned to some people, some years ago, she went on retreat for 3 years. So to deepen herself in order to deepen how she serves. So that's a different story, but yes, I'm indebted, grateful to God, and blessed to have her in my life.
I have a quick comment. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Syra here. Sister Amina, my question to you would be, because today's notes, when I looked at them, there is a lot of like synthesis of positive words like hope, resilience, improving communication, becoming more self-aware about our own emotions, and then also recognizing the power of gratitude and coming from a place of care. And I understand the theme of religiosity and spirituality, but in the mindfulness work, in the trauma work, both as a therapist, I'm thinking, and now as a patient for my own well-being, learning from your course here, you see that CBT forms a triangle: cognitive behavior and affect, right? But in the mindfulness work, if there was an overarching picture, what would you, in the trauma work that you're teaching us, what would be like a model picture, so to speak, if there is something that you can point me to? I know polyvagal theory, I know about generally the mindfulness from a DBT perspective, but in your training or in your experience, what works for people to heal from either illness or losses or whatever traumas they have gone under and are coping with or trying to cope with, in the spiritual context, or even without it, what is an overarching model that you can point us to?
Oh,
in
God,
your readings or in your trainings?
I need to.
Like a picture model, like a, I'm a visual person, so when I look at a connections between certain things or concepts listed as if they are a map and they interconnect, if
Where,
there is a picture like that.
where does mindfulness and trauma work interconnect? Is that part of what you're asking?
Yes, yeah.
Let me just pause with it. I mean, I have something in my mind, but I just want to sit
Thank you.
with that for a moment.
Thank you.
I think as someone practicing this work, the connection is becoming more aware and deeper listening
Mhm.
to what the person is saying and what they're not saying.
Mm.
It's listening, and it's listening to the health that's always present in the person you're working with. Where does it feel like you're being asked to go? And when I work with someone, it's always asking permission. So I might say, I have a feeling in my body. I'll ask them before they get in the table or Zoom, particularly if they're new. I may pause and ask you if I have permission to explore something with you, and you have the right to say yes or no. Listen to what feels right in your body. So a lot of times this work is really about awareness, and it's about listening and asking permission. A lot of people didn't learn boundaries, which is why we have trauma. We didn't know how to recognize red flags and say, no thanks, none for me today, or how to be safe. And sometimes we were too little. So I will always say to somebody, I'm feeling something in my body. Would you be willing to let me reflect that back to you?
Mhm.
And if the person says yes, then I might take it to another place. I'd say, can I ask you something?
Mhm.
So to proceed slowly, because none of this work, whether it's insight or trauma or compassionate communication, we have a kind of knowledge, say polyvagal theory, or how to do this, or the foundation for compassionate communication. But it's always designed to take us further into being present with that person and listening. And for me, asking permission. Do I have your permission? I have a question I'd like to ask you. Can I ask that question? Okay. And to go slowly, that's the biggest piece, is to really go slow. Because sometimes the person might be able to verbalize something, that something is still unfolding inside their body being. It's still unfolding. And to pause. And I'll let people know that tears are welcome. Right? And it's also listening and getting a sense when it feels complete, because we don't want that person to open to too much and go into overwhelm. Overwhelm re-stimulates the wound. And there are ways to work with anger and let anger out, and one can do that. But even with that, it's a delicate dance. So it's a delicate dance in naming things, because it's, it takes, I can say I do my best. I think I rewrote some of those questions about how do I create a safe space or how do I heal or something. But ultimately, I can try and create a space that feels safe and compassionate, that's necessary and natural. But it may take that client time to feel comfortable with me. That's a given. That's a given. It takes me a long time. That's why I have a couple people that I would go to, and people that have done the work on themselves. so that they understand and I can feel comfortable letting my guard down to express things. And that was one reason I went to see someone last year or earlier this year in naming family secrets, is I wanted to have somebody to witness that. I can do it by myself, but it's not the same as having someone there whose heart, who has wisdom, their feet on the ground, knows how to listen, and can hold a sacred space for those words to come out. So I think all of these things, at the heart of all of these things is heart, is the human heart. So, yeah, and go just, just supporting a gentle unfolding. No need to hurry. And making sure when that session ends, I'm sure you know as a therapist, there's a moment where you feel like it's done, it feels complete, but asking the person so that, because, again, it's building a vocabulary. Does this feel complete for you?
Mhm.
Is this complete? Person I go to always says when we're done, do you want a glass of water? Do you want to get up and walk a little bit? Take a few steps? Helps to integrate this in the body and get our drinking water helps to ground us.
So, Sister Amina, here is an example. I recently sent something to my sister, and it was a simple flyer for young teenager or preteen daughters, girls, to develop character skills, right? And my brother-in-law saw that on my sister's phone, and he right away texted me back that I appreciate this, but I know how to raise my children in moral aspect. Um, that text back to me hurt, but it made me feel as if he felt threatened that I am implying that you're not raising my 9-10-year-old niece correctly, whereas that was not my intention. So I didn't respond back. But then, of course, my sister wrote back and she said that, he's just being grumpy and he's home and he wants to spend more time with kids. So I just took them out of Sunday school because of COVID in New York. And he's not himself as religious, unfortunately. So they're both doctors. She's my younger sister. My brother-in-law is exactly my age, 3 days older than me. But I then said, it hurts me to know that he is not as religious, but of course I can't, I know my place as an aunt.
Right.
And I will never give you some flyer about children's groups or something. You both are doctors, you know how to raise your children. All it was just an FYI. How come he got so upset? And so, and then his thing was that let me live in peace, which means that if you're sending something like this or other Islamic content or things like that, somehow or the other, if my sister wants to place kids in those classes online, it causes a parenting conflict in them. So how should I have handled it? I didn't speak to him directly, nor did I call him. I felt upset, but then I said, you know what? Allah has taught me through my illness and my loss that this is not a petty little fight I'm going to have in an argument and disturb my sister's house. Whereas she has apologized to me and she says, I value your input and I know you love our kids. It's just that he is not religious, and whenever he sees that any one of us, whether his family or our family, is trying to tell him that, or making him feel like as if we can suggest something to the religious groups and activities for kids, as if somehow or the other it's a reflection that we believe that he is not doing that part himself, so we should step in and do it.
So I'm wondering if we make it really simple. When my brother-in-law said this, so you can do it two ways. I felt, because I needed, just strip it right down, strip all the stories away. And then say, when my brother-in-law said, I wonder if he was feeling because he needed. So you've named two feelings. One was grumpy.
My sister's words, not mine.
That's her words, yeah. but
Yeah.
he was feeling something because he has a need. And again, her words, she said peace. So see if you could go through that list quietly and say, I wonder if he's feeling because he needs. That's simple. Write it down. And also go through your own feelings and needs.
Mm.
You know, when he said this, I felt because I needed. Just sit with it quietly. It's not a quick doing with the mind, just letting it sit with you. And you know when that list feels complete. Write down your feelings, and if you've got the list there, and then there's lots of different lists online. We don't have to agree with everything on them, but
We can pinpoint the exact feeling rather than the overall negative emotion or a hurtful emotion. You're absolutely
you
right.
can
I
say I was yeah, and but it can get more specific. I felt sad, you know. I felt grumpy. I felt sad. I really have a need to have my, you know,
peace of mind given
yeah.
back.
But strip it down simple.
Yeah.
Keep it, if you break it down really simple.
I think why I presented this example is, Sister Amina, because in our cultures, in any culture, these relationships are so delicate that we have to be very careful also. While we are in the Western culture encouraged to be more assertive, even if it is just naming a feeling or coming across somebody with our own felt emotion. And I think that if I look at it, it is just said and reinforced in that way, because if I I look at our faith and how we need to stand up by the right or stand up and encourage something without coming across as imposing. Truthfully speaking, I should not feel bad about having sent something like that to my sister when
Right.
I know what my intention is.
That was
But
a
then,
private conversation in a way. That was
yeah,
between you and your sister.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I think the way you reflected and the way you suggested that how the feelings can be neutrally processed can hold in and kind of rein in the negative emotions that can further spill into a impulsively sent answer back that I could have done but I didn't. And
Full
then also
full report on Sunday.
all right.
No, I would love to hear, you know, was that helpful for you when you do it? That's
Yeah.
the piece. And sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
Sometimes we need to talk things out. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I want to, while I think of it, if I can just put my email down here. I'd be helpful to put it at the end rather than the beginning. And I don't know if we're at the end yet. There. So I'm me, okay? So does anyone else have a question or comment or a need that they would like to express? I was thinking how fortunate we are to have Dr. Yamina. It's been so fortunate for me to just keep reminding us like an ayah in the Quran over and over. It's the sustainer. It's the sustainer, to remember the, you know, everything emanates from the sustainer. So that's a wonderful barakah that we have in our lives. Um, I have a little bit of information I can share. Would that be okay? Do people need to jump now? What's happening? Yes. Okay. Safina has asked, and I could remail next Sunday. She's asked for a list of resources to read up on compassionate communication. I gave one resource I gave is a free resource, and it's on that list, and it's called z-library.org. And you go in and you can create an account and you can read a gazillion books for free. And they have a lot of Marshall Rosenberg's books for free, Jack Kornfield's books for free. Other people that have written specifically, I would say, nonviolent communication, if you want to stay connected to that group. And I also have Tom Bond's website, and I mentioned this, I wrote the name of this book down. It's not on Z Library, but you can get it. And I think with some people that have studied with me, studied me would be interesting too, but studied with me, locally, we may start a group after the new year where we'll each have a copy of this. I'm not running the group. It's going to be, people will have a different person each week, each maybe meet twice a month and read one of his lessons and then take a week or two to work on it and meet again. So I don't want to have a group, but I said, yeah, let's come together, and there's a few guidelines, and then we'll each take a turn doing that. So that might be a possibility. And let's see, compassionate communication. Lots of books on mindfulness. Tara Brach, I think I have her name down, and maybe Sharon Salzberg. And they also are wonderful online resources to go to their websites or YouTube and just hear their talks. I decided I needed to work with forgiveness and self-forgiveness. So I've been listening to different talks on that specific subject. So
I just wanted to add that the resource list was emailed on December 10th to those who were registered, but if nobody, if someone hasn't received that, then inshallah, feel free to put your email down and I can resend it, inshallah.
I'm going to put zinelibrary.org down. So that's a great resource. If, let's see. Yeah,
Thank you, Sister Amina.
great.
One quick question, Anil. If I were to do this course that you have done in one shot, because you have taught us, so I know a lot of the important groundwork, who would you recommend that I should follow in a more in-depth series as a therapist?
I would say to go on to this year-long course.
Oh, mashallah. Okay.
Yeah, and they do one lesson a week, and you attend a lesson a week, and they have webinars and online meetings. But the other thing might be to see if some people in this group would like to create a course where you might meet once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think because this will take you from kind of right from the beginning of it. If people that do this course often have no background in this work. You don't have. Got his website here. I think it's NY.
Thank you so much.
NYC. I'm guessing that's his website. I just put it on again. But I find it's good to have people, for me, you need to make it a nice statement. I like to be in a class or a place where there's learning and you have people you can bounce the ideas off of.
Yeah, me too.
So,
Me too. I don't think that this work we can do by being in a silo or in an echo chamber. It needs other people to be around. Yeah.
no. And one of my hopes in sharing all of this information is, well, so this, you have the worldwide course and for compassionate communication and links for insight meditation. And Dr. Amina is doing that. And I think our sister Miriam in Charlottesville. And the trauma work, like I said, can be taught online. And I would really see people that are drawn to these things. If you're drawn to it, just like you wanting to do, is to study it. Because the more people that have exposure to this, and the more that we can, if I can begin to change my own wiring, my relationship then changes with people.
And Sister Mia, if there is a workbook that you know of in this work, that either, I mean, we can all create some lists and we can, based on our own stories or whatever we are processing the trauma as, But if there is an actual workbook that you think that is
For
helpful,
trauma work or
yes,
so
for
yeah, I
the
put
trauma work.
Dana's book down, and this is actually, anyone can read it, but it's actually, I like, she says, the polyvagal theory. So she doesn't say the polyvagal truth. She
I
calls
see.
it the theory
Okay.
in therapy and how to use it. And
Thank you.
if you can look at it online, she
Yeah.
also has a workbook for therapists to use with clients.
Thank
And one of the first handouts I sent to people, and I never explained it, but it was a piece of paper that said, you know, it said like ventral vagal, sympathetic, dorsal vagal in 3 different colors, black and red and blue.
Mhm.
What I did was I had at one time laminated that paper with as many of these as I could put on it and cut it out and made it into bookmarks to give to clients. So then begin tracking, hey, I just dropped into dorsal. Now I can name it. So it was just kind of a fun thing to do. But there's workbooks, and even in this book, lots of projects that you can do one-to-one or that I think would make great workshops.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you can find her also on YouTube.
YouTube. And this is the Janet. This is written by Janet or no?
I'm
one
sorry,
of the one of your trainers that you, Janet Evergreen?
Janet Evergreen is my local trainer.
I see.
She's a very sweet person.
And the book is by
Her name is Deb Dana.
Dana. Okay.
It'll
Because
come up. Go on Amazon.
I know of the work of Steve Porges. He came in my fellowship at UMass, and also Dr. Bruce Perry. But they were talking from a 0 to 10-year-old early child development in the context of adverse childhood events. But I think when this book I look at now that I found it, Dr. Dana's book, and the trauma work, and Steve Porges I see here too with polyvagal theory and all. His website too is I'm familiar with, so I didn't bring up his name, but I do know that this is more about like adults and women and how we process as,
It
I
goes
guess.
back to babies. I can promise you this goes back to babies. And there's a way to, I won't say her book is, but my experience in receiving this work and being in classes is so many of our patterns can go back to pre and perinatal.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's something I posted on Facebook that both Sarah and Ziba saw, our sisters, and somebody who just passed over. And he was a trainer, very much so in pre and perinatal work. And he was, did a very deep kind of work that's a conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
But some of my teachers came from his lineage.
I see.
So
Thank you, Dr.
so wonderful work being done, and we can actually go back somatically. We have somatic memory to those early times.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
And see how those patterns became laid in us. You know, it's just, it is what it is. They're Rumi's veils. This can get very heady conversation, but in a simple poetic way. It's Rumi's veils that he speaks about, you know.
Yeah.
And they're there for protection, and also we want to take them off so we have our heart becomes clear. So,
Thank
I
you.
see a question called, what time is the Sunday session? Let's see, if nobody answers, I'll say 6 in the morning, and I bet I'll have someone that'll answer. Would morning or afternoon work well for people? Is there a vote here?
Do you want to first introduce what the Sunday session is about?
Well, I think that Sister Maha made a suggestion is we might have just question and answers, that things that need addressing, and that would be quite wonderful. Yeah, and what if I send that? Yes, let me link for insight meditations and lectures. Let me, well, certainly go to Zoom, and there's certainly books there. let me bring something specific next week and I'll type it in. I have it on the resource list, but there's a specific something to bring that in, Sister Zubeida, if that's okay.
So this is the final session. Next week might be.
So, yeah. So I have a little thing, but I could do this on Sunday. One little piece we didn't cover.
So if 8 p.m. is good for people, Dr. Yamina, you want to
Yeah,
chime in?
I thought originally it was 8 p.m. because that's what we are used to.
Okay, that's fine.
So if everybody here thinks it's a good idea to do a 2-hour session on Sunday at 8, just dedicated for questions and answers.
Mhm. It should be okay with me. Yeah.
Great
Sure.
idea.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for big work in setting all of this up.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Inshallah, we'll see you Sunday.
Next week, inshallah, is the retreat.
So it's
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yes.
so are we going
Inshallah.
to do it in 2 days from today then, or the following Sunday?
No, this Sunday.
This Sunday in
Not
2 days.
tomorrow, the day after tomorrow.
Okay.
So it's fresh.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. I have another meeting at 10 o'clock now, so I better go. Thank you so much.
We're using Sister Amina Stevens' phrase, do you feel complete? So I had a sense that maybe there needs to be another session for questions and answers so that everybody might reach the feeling of being complete.
Mhm.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Great idea. Great idea.
Yeah, I think so.
Allah.
Thank you.
Can I make one suggestion? A notes I sent last night and this week I recopied. Bless my roommate who showed me how to copy and paste some months ago. We never went over in our talk about compassionate communication. There's really 4 pillars in the foundation: observation, feelings, needs, and how to make a request.
Mhm.
And the information is simple. It probably takes a lifetime to learn how to do it. But you may want to just recognize that this is in handouts. Look over this. And if you have questions around it, bring your questions.
Mhm.
So
Did you want to go over it now, Sister Amina?
I can do it if you would like to, and I can try and be mindful of time. I just didn't know what people's needs are.
So because this being the final session, as Dr. Sarah Al-Alim reminded us, you want to, I'm inviting you at least as one suggestion from me is to wrap it up and bring it to a completion.
Okay.
The way you find, the way, however you find fit.
Thank you. Requests. So feelings and needs and requests. So sadly and fortunately, making a request is not about telling the other person what to do. I mentioned earlier, we often go from an observation to a request, and we do a bypass. We bypass our heart, our feelings, and our needs. And this is because we want to get this fixed right now. Except this is not about fixing, right? So what a request is a way to express our needs and support others in meeting their needs. It's a way to make life more wonderful for yourself and others. So we're getting some feedback from someone.
Yeah, Saira, your mic is not muted. So
Okay, sorry, I'm
like
sorry. I think
so
I must
yeah.
have
So we need to, who else mic is not muted? No, I think now, yes, I think that did it. Thank you.
So imagine if people acted on our request with joy. And this is Marshall's words, expressing the divine energy that exists in all of us, instead of doing what we ask to avoid negative consequences. So I'll read that again. Imagine if people acted on our request with joy, expressing the divine energy that exists in all of us instead of doing what we ask to avoid negative consequences. That means instead of saying, if you don't clean up your room, you can't do this. That's a negative consequence. So how we connect with someone so that possibly we may have to negotiate, but so that it's win-win rather than punishment, right? Something like that. When we have a need that we would like to have met, we want to use positive action language connecting our need to a request. It's important to express observations, feelings, and needs before making a request. And remember, I said earlier this evening, it's going to sound like therapy talk, but if at least when I'm journaling and I need to express something and I want to be clear, I might say, I'm feeling because I need. To someone else, I might say, what do you need right now? That sounds a little more human and connecting, you know, or I'm not feeling so good. You know, I better go home and sleep. There's a little softer rather than sounding too formulaic. A request is positive. It's not going to be stop making that noise. It's going to be something like, I need a little more quiet. Could you please turn down the TV? Would you be willing to turn down the TV? So a request is positive. It is a request to do something rather than to stop something. Stop making all that noise, or I need some quiet right now. Can you hear and feel the difference when I read those two things? Stop making all that noise, or I need some quiet right now. It's a different feeling with that, and even in how I say it. A request is specific. Instead of saying, I can't talk about this now, can we get together and talk about it sometime next week? That's not specific. Specific would be, hey, can we get together Saturday morning at 10 o'clock to talk about this? That's specific. When I hear that, it feels very grounding. It's really clear. It's not nebulous floating out here. Let's get together sometime next week and talk about this. A request is doable. Saying, I'd like to see your room kept clean all of the time is probably not doable, at least not for me. Okay, I'd like it to be. I'd like to see your room clean all the time. It's not doable. You might be will say something like, you know, on Saturday morning, I would sure love to see that you've got all your clothes in the clothes hamper and instead of on the floor. So you want to be specific about what your need is and have it doable. In order for people to know it is a request, they need to know or feel that they can disagree and still be understood. People are not always willing to meet our requests. They're not always willing to meet our requests. And that becomes the work when you deepen into this course, how to work with that, how to negotiate in a way that might be agreeable to two people, or maybe the other person just won't meet that request. How do we deal with that feeling then? A demand is authoritarian and is often made without considering the feelings and needs of the other person. A demand will sound like, you have to, you must. When we make a demand, it is to meet our own need to be right. It's more of a power over rather than a power with. It can also be a way to make others feel our pain when we don't share our feelings, and usually comes from our own past experience. So that's a big line. Sometimes when we want to be right, it comes from something in the past when we didn't get an opportunity to be seen and heard and met in a different way. So that's how we compensate, right? A request is not a demand. A demand is power over. A request is power with. For example, boy, those socks get a line every time in my notes. Pick up those dirty socks is a demand. And would you be willing to pick up those dirty socks is a request. Okay. And let's see, the last thing I have on this, when we're listening to other people, and just in life, one of the sisters shared this last week. She was just quietly noticing what and imagining what someone might have been feeling when they said, right? So when listening to others, or when we become triggered, pause on the inside and slow it way down. And that becomes more lessons. That becomes something else. You see that? But slow things down, even if it's just noticing feelings. And of course, there's a whole aspect of this teaching of learning how to reflect back to somebody. Are you feeling? You know, like our sister Syra was saying, what can we imagine what your brother-in-law was feeling and what his need might be? And then imagine what if we express that to somebody? We're having a conversation and they're getting angry, and that takes a certain kind of practice and listening in ourselves. Is my heart in a place where I can give empathy now or not? And if not, that's okay. So there we are. Completion.
Jazakallah khair, Amina, and everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Inshallah, then we will all meet on Sunday at 8 p.m. for questions. Again, as Dr. Amina reminded us, please note that our annual retreat will be next Thursday, the 24th to the 26th, inshallah. So please check receivingnoor.org for registration if you haven't done so already. And as always, the sessions will be posted on YouTube, inshallah, for this
Saturday,
series.
tomorrow evening is our bi-weekly meeting, inshallah, for those who are interested.
Yes, that's right. So everyone who's doing the healing prescription, that's the 3-month healing prescription of focusing on the pause, focus, reflect, and gratitude through istighfar. Inshallah, join us tomorrow as well for everyone who is already committed to that practice. Inshallah, tomorrow at 8 p.m.
I have a question. Can new folks join the 3-month program? I've been talking about it, and a couple of folks have expressed interest, but I wasn't sure if they could possibly join now.
They can if they're patient and listen. And
Okay, great. Thank you. I will pass that on to them.
And there's a resource if you have it. If not, feel free to email me of what the prescription is exactly. That includes instructions and an assessment tool, which sort of gives them the information that I've forwarded to people who have joined us later on. And like Dr. Yamina said, it would be a time to start the practice and then listen in, because the calls are more like motivation for everyone who's practicing and reevaluating where we are and how to improve. And inshallah, you'll be able to help them.
Great, thank you.
Subhanallah, like I'm glad you're saying that, Meher, because people are sent your way because they need it. And inshallah, because they need it, inshallah, they will have patience. So bismillah, just like be great. You were sent for them as well. Like, yani, subhanallah, it's just amazing to see how people are sent to meet like what they need through what Allah gives. So alhamdulillah, bismillah.
Truly, I mean, we can see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everywhere. It's like we just have to be looking for them, and they're there. But if you are not paying attention and looking, then you don't see them, you miss them.
Alhamdulillah for paying attention. Sarah, I asked
Jazakumullah
if you can just highlight what is the retreat about, like the topic of the retreat, what is the goal from the retreat for those who are just joining here and did not receive the flyer.
And also one question along with the retreat. I've signed up for it, but I haven't gotten any kind of an acknowledgement. So I'm hoping that you guys are going to be sending that out closer to the retreat.
Yes, exactly. Inshallah. So far, nothing has been sent for the registrants. The flyer is available on Facebook and the website. And while the schedule is still being finalized, inshallah, once it is, then it will be emailed out to everyone, inshallah. And as for the topic, it's until our hearts find tranquility, the path to lasting happiness, with a focus on how.
Sarah, can I ask you a question
Sure.
regarding that retreat, since it's my first time? You just mentioned at least 3 social media locations for having the material. Can you just narrow it down for me to 1? Because I might be entering my own surgery soon.
Okay, no, there's not 3 social media. I don't know anything.
I think I heard Facebook, and then we have Receiving Noor on WhatsApp, and then we have the email. So that's what I'm referring to.
Oh, okay. So if you go on in the Receiving Noor WhatsApp group, there was the link, but you would probably have to scroll up to find it. So if you just go to receivingnur.org, inshallah, you'll find it easily.
No, I registered from it. We're talking about receiving material back. I think somebody
So
mentioned.
the material will be emailed to you, inshallah, once it's
Oh, okay.
final.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank Sister Amina Stevens for sharing with us her passion and her amazing recovery and personal experiences with trauma. I appreciate your honesty, Sister Amina, and your gentleness and your willingness to teach and to share with us your experiences. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Sarah, for moderating these 6 series of understanding trauma. And inshallah, in addition to upcoming programs, hopefully the 2-hour session on Sunday at 8 p.m. can be another opportunity to answer questions and to bring that feeling of completion further and deeper for anybody else.
Thank you for your heartfelt efforts in all of this. Thank you, Sister Sarah, Dr. Yamina, Sister Maha, and everybody who's here, and Sister Isra. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister Amina.
So tomorrow, inshallah, at 8 p.m. is the bi-weekly check-in, and it's open, right? It's open, but get in touch with Sarah to get a copy of the prescription for new people who are joining. And just to remind you that this has been in response to a month-long series of sessions on healing with istighfar with Dr. Yamina Bubanaya.
Sarah has posted her email. If anyone needs that, it's in the chat. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Jazakallah khair again, Sister Amina, for offering such tools that I find extremely practical in my personal life. Inshallah, more of us will practice and nurture that compassionate quality and be more connected to that, inshallah. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام.
السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة
عليكم
الله.
السلام.
السلام عليكم.